I never thought I would hold this key again. The metal is cold against my palm, heavier than I remembered. Rust has claimed the edges, leaving orange stains on my fingertips like dried blood. 20 years have passed since I last stood before these chained doors. 20 years since I swore I would never return to this place that once held everything I thought was sacred. The fog clings to the valley like a burial shroud, thick and gray and suffocating. It swallows the sound of my footsteps on the cracked concrete steps, muffles the distant call of crows in the bare oak trees. Even the world seems to hold its breath here, as if it knows what happened within these walls, as if it remembers the weight of words that were never meant to heal. First Redeemer Baptist Church. The name is carved into the cornerstone, barely visible beneath decades of weathering and neglect. The white paint on the clapboard siding has peeled away in long strips, revealing the gray wood beneath like exposed bone. The steeple, once proud and pointing toward heaven, now leans slightly to the left, its cross tilted at an angle that makes my chest tighten with something I cannot name. I am 41 years old now. I run a successful business restoring historic buildings, breathing life back into forgotten places. I have traveled to cathedrals in Europe, synagogues in New York, mosques in California. I have learned to see beauty in decay, to find hope in ruins. But standing here, key in hand, I feel like I'm 21 again, trembling and ashamed, waiting for judgment that I knew would come. The chains across the front doors are newer than the rust on my key suggests. Someone has been here recently, someone who cared enough to secure what remains. The thought surprises me. I had assumed this place was truly abandoned, left to rot like so many small-town churches across America. But someone has been watching over it, keeping it locked but not forgotten. I slide the key into the lock, and it turns with a grinding protest that echoes off the empty hills. The chains fall away with a sound like breaking bones. The door swings open on hinges that scream in the morning air, and I step across the threshold into darkness. The smell hits me first. Dust and mildew and something else, something deeper. The scent of old wood and older prayers, of hymns that have soaked into the floorboards over generations. It is the smell of my childhood, of Sunday mornings when I believed in absolutes, when I thought love was something you could earn through good behavior and quiet obedience. My footsteps echo in the silence. Each board beneath my feet groans with age and neglect. The pews still stand in their neat rows, though dust has settled on them like snow. Hymnals rest where they were left, their pages yellowed and brittle. The stained glass windows, those magnificent pieces my mother had commissioned when I was still a child, are cracked in places, letting in thin streams of colored light that dance across the walls like ghosts. I walk slowly down the center aisle, the same path I walked every Sunday for the first 21 years of my life. The same path I walked that final morning when everything changed, when I stood before this congregation and spoke my truth, only to watch it turned into something ugly and shameful. The altar looms ahead of me, unchanged. The same wooden cross hangs above it. The same communion table sits below. This is where I was baptized at 8 years old, where I was confirmed at 16, where I thought I would one day be married to a woman I could never love. This is where my father stood and called me an abomination, where the people who had known me since birth turned their faces away, as if I had become something infectious. I reach into my coat pocket and pull out the letter. The paper is crisp and white, so different from everything else in this place. The church seal is embossed in the corner, the same symbol that once adorned the bulletins I helped my mother fold every Saturday evening. The ink is fresh, the handwriting familiar despite the years that have passed. The building is collapsing. The congregation is gone. We need your help. Please, Desmond, you are the only one who can save it. I place the letter on the pulpit where my father once preached about love and judgment in the same breath. My hands shake as I light a single candle from the box of matches I found in the vestry. The flame flickers in the draft from the broken windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I stand beneath the place where I was broken, where my truth was met with silence and shame. The candle burns steady now, a small defiance against the darkness. Above me, the stained glass saints gaze down through their fractured panes, their faces serene and knowing. My mother had insisted on including Saint Stephen among them, the first martyr, the one who died for speaking truth. I wonder if she knew then what she was trying to tell me, if she understood that some truths are worth the stones they bring. The fog presses against the windows like curious fingers, and somewhere in the distance, a single crow calls out. I close my eyes and let the silence wrap around me like a shroud. For the first time in 20 years, I am home. For the first time in 20 years, I am exactly where I swore I would never be again. But I'm not the same person who left this place. I'm not the frightened boy who believed that love was something to be ashamed of. I am a man who has learned to build beautiful things from broken pieces, who has discovered that sometimes the only way to heal is to return to the place where the wound was made. The candle flame holds steady. The silence deepens. And I wait, surrounded by memories and dust and the ghosts of prayers that were never answered, for whatever comes next. I drive back to Baltimore through the morning mist, the letter folded in my jacket pocket like a secret I am not ready to share. The highway stretches ahead of me, familiar and safe, leading me away from the ghosts I have just awakened and back to the life I have built from the ashes of the one I left behind. My house sits on a quiet street in Federal Hill, a 19th century row house I restored myself when I first moved to the city. The brick facade is painted deep blue, the shutters cream, the front door a warm burgundy that catches the afternoon light. Inside, everything speaks of careful attention, of a man who has learned to create beauty from broken things. Reclaimed chestnut beams stretch across the living room ceiling. Wide plank floors, salvaged from a demolished church in Pennsylvania, glow amber in the lamplight. The walls are lined with photographs of my work, black and white images of stained glass windows mid-restoration, half-rebuilt steeples reaching toward cloudy skies, the intricate stonework of forgotten temples. This is the world I have made for myself. Quiet, controlled, safe. I pour myself a glass of wine and sit in the leather chair by the window, watching the evening settle over the harbor. The wine is good, French, the kind I could never have afforded in my younger years. My business has been successful beyond anything I imagined when I first left Marigold with nothing but a truck and a toolbox and a burning need to prove that I could build something beautiful from the wreckage of my past. Clark Historic Restoration specializes in sacred architecture. Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples. I have a reputation for precision, for understanding the soul of a building as well as its structure. My clients trust me with their most precious spaces, their sanctuaries and gathering places. They know I will treat their sacred ground with the reverence it deserves. What they do not know is that I learned this reverence through loss. That every window I restore, every beam I replace, every stone I reset is an act of penance for the sacred space I was driven from. That I have spent 20 years trying to make amends for the sin of being exactly who I was created to be. The phone rings. It is Marcus, my assistant, calling from the office to confirm tomorrow's appointments. We have 3 projects running simultaneously. A Methodist church in Annapolis needs new windows. A synagogue in Silver Spring requires foundation work. A Quaker meeting house in Easton is being converted to a community center, and they want to preserve the original architecture while updating it for modern use. I listen to Marcus recite the details, the schedules, the budgets. This is my life now. Organized, predictable, every day mapped out in appointments and deadlines and the careful dance of restoration work. I am known for my calm demeanor, my ability to solve problems without drama, my reluctance to discuss personal matters. My crew respects me. My clients recommend me. I am successful in every way that matters. But tonight, with the letter burning in my pocket, success feels hollow. I was 21 when I left Marigold. 21 and terrified and so deeply ashamed that I could barely breathe. My father had just delivered his final sermon about the wages of sin. The congregation had just voted to recommend my departure for the good of the community. And Elijah Boone, the boy I had loved since we were children, had already packed his bags and disappeared into the night without saying goodbye. I remember that final morning with perfect clarity. Standing in the sanctuary where I had grown up, where I had first learned to pray, where I had believed God lived in the spaces between the hymns and the sunlight streaming through my mother's stained glass windows. I had thought I was being brave by speaking my truth. I had thought honesty was a virtue they had taught me to value. Instead, I learned that truth is only welcome when it fits the shape of what people want to hear. My father did not speak to me after that morning. He packed my belongings and left them on the porch while I was at work. My mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but she did not stop him. She did not defend me. She did not say the words I needed to hear. She simply watched as I loaded my truck with everything I owned and drove away from the only home I had ever known. I did not go to her funeral 3 years later. I told myself I was too busy, too far away, too hurt. The truth was simpler and more shameful. I was afraid that if I returned, even for her burial, I would crumble. I would become that 21-year-old boy again, desperate for acceptance, willing to deny myself for the promise of love that would never come. Instead, I sent flowers. White lilies, her favorite. I signed a card with my name, but no message. I did not know what to say to a dead woman who had loved me, but had not been brave enough to fight for me when I needed her most. The wine glass is empty in my hands. Outside, the city hums with its evening rhythms, cars passing on the cobblestone street, the distant sound of laughter from the restaurant on the corner. This is my world now, urban. A place where no one knows my story unless I choose to tell it. I have told it only once, to a man named David who shared my bed for 3 years and thought he might share my future. But when he pressed me for details about my family, about my childhood, about the reasons I sometimes went quiet during church bells or hymns on the radio, I found I could not give him the words. The story belonged to a different person, a boy who had believed in things I could no longer name. David left eventually, frustrated by my walls, by my inability to let him fully in. He said he loved me, but he could not love a ghost. He said I was living like a man in hiding, even though no one was hunting me anymore. He was right, of course, but knowing the truth of something and being able to change it are different creatures entirely. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, past the photographs of Gothic arches and rose windows, past the architectural drawings framed on the walls. My bed is large and comfortable, covered in white linen and soft gray blankets. The room is peaceful, designed for rest, for dreams that do not involve the sound of chains falling or the smell of old wood and older prayers. But tonight, I know I will not sleep well. Tonight, I will lie awake thinking about the letter in my jacket pocket, about the handwriting I recognized, about the words that have followed me home like a stray dog I cannot bring myself to turn away. The building is collapsing. The congregation is gone. We need your help. I built this life carefully, brick by brick, beam by beam, like the buildings I restore. I made it solid and beautiful and safe. I made it a sanctuary where the past could not reach me, where the boy who was broken could rest in peace while the man he became moved forward into light. But sanctuaries, I have learned, are not fortresses. They are places where we go to remember what we have lost and find the courage to seek it again. And sometimes, no matter how far we run, no matter how carefully we build our new worlds, the old ones call us back. The letter waits in my jacket pocket. Tomorrow, I will have to decide whether to answer. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I lie in my bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of ships in the harbor, thinking about handwriting I have not seen in 20 years but recognized immediately. Reverend Clay Hastings. The man who replaced my father when the congregation finally grew tired of his fire and brimstone sermons. Clay had been young then, fresh from seminary, full of ideas about community outreach and social justice. He had arrived in Marigold 6 months after I left, too late to witness my public humiliation, but not too late to inherit its aftermath. I remember hearing about him from my mother during our brief, stilted phone conversations in those first few years. She would mention him carefully, as if testing whether his name might crack the fragile peace we had built between us. Clay was different, she would say. Clay was trying to heal the divisions my father had created. Clay was asking questions about the families who had left, the members who had been driven away. But Clay had never reached out to me. Not when my father died. Not when my mother followed him 3 years later. Not in all the years since, when he could have written a letter, made a phone call, extended some gesture of reconciliation. Until now, when the building itself was dying and they needed something only I could provide. I rise before dawn and dress carefully. Dark jeans, a simple button-down shirt, a jacket that speaks of competence without ostentation. I'm but a Marigold on business, I tell myself. This is a professional consultation, nothing more. I have done this dozens of times before, assessed historic properties, determined whether they could be saved or should be allowed to rest in peace. The drive takes an hour and a half through the Maryland countryside. The landscape changes as I move away from the city, becoming more rural, more familiar. Rolling hills give way to farmland, then to the dense woods that have always surrounded Marigold like a protective embrace, or perhaps like a prison wall, depending on your perspective. I have not been back in 20 years, but I know every curve of this road. I know the red barn that marks the halfway point, the creek that runs parallel to the highway for the last 10 miles, the billboard for Henderson's farm stand that has been advertising the same seasonal produce since I was a child. Memory is a peculiar thing. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can recall with perfect clarity the way the light fell through the trees on this exact stretch of road the morning I left home for the last time. Marigold looks smaller than I remembered. The main street, which once seemed so long and important, reveals itself to be barely 4 blocks of weathered storefronts and empty lots. The hardware store where I bought my first toolbox has been boarded up for years. The diner where my mother and I would go for ice cream after church is now a tax preparation office that appears to be closed permanently. Even the gas station at the edge of town looks abandoned, its windows dark, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. This is what happens to small towns when the world moves on without them. They shrink and fade until they become ghost versions of themselves, haunted by the memory of what they used to be. I park in front of the church and sit in my truck for a long moment, engine ticking as it cools. The building looks even worse in daylight than it did in the fog. The foundation is cracked, the steps are crumbling, and several of the windows are boarded up with plywood that has warped and split with age. The cemetery behind the church is overgrown with weeds, the headstones tilted at odd angles like broken teeth, but is still standing, still defiant against the elements and the passage of time, still reaching toward heaven with its crooked steeple and its tilted cross. I walk around the building slowly, making mental notes about the structural damage, the necessary repairs, the cost of restoration. This is what I do. This is what I am good at. I assess and calculate and determine what can be saved and what must be rebuilt. I try not to think about the memories embedded in every board and beam, the ghosts that live in the spaces between the walls. The parsonage sits 50 yards away, connected to the church by a covered walkway that my father used to traverse every morning for private prayer. The house looks better maintained than the church, though still showing signs of neglect. The paint is faded but not peeling. The roof appears sound. The small garden my mother used to tend has been replaced by a modest lawn that someone still takes the trouble to mow. I knock on a front door and wait. Through the window, I can see movement inside, the shadow of someone approaching. The door opens, and I'm looking at Clay Hastings for the first time in 20 years. He is older, of course. His dark hair has gone gray at the temples, and lines have formed around his eyes and mouth. But he is still recognizably the young minister who came to Marigold with such hope and determination. He wears a simple sweater and jeans, the casual uniform of a man who has learned that formal collars do not make him more holy. He looks at me for a long moment without speaking. Then he steps aside and gestures for me to come in. The parsonage is smaller than I remembered, but it feels warmer somehow. The furniture is simple but comfortable, the walls lined with books and family photographs. I recognize some of the pieces from my childhood, furniture that belonged to my parents, artifacts that somehow survived the dissolution of their world. Clay leads me to the kitchen and puts on a pot of tea without asking if I want any. We sit at the small table by the window, the same table where my mother used to spread church bulletins every Saturday evening, where she would plan the flowers for Sunday service, where she would worry quietly about the members who had stopped coming, the families who had drifted away. He does not apologize immediately. He does not launch into explanations or justifications. He simply pours the tea when it is ready and pushes a cup across the table toward me. The tea is good, strong and black with just a hint of bergamot. I wrap my hands around the warm cup and wait for him to speak. We sit in silence for several minutes. Outside, a cardinal lands on the bird feeder that hangs from the oak tree, the same tree where I used to climb as a child when the sermons grew too long and the sanctuary felt too small. The cardinal is brilliant red against the gray morning sky, a splash of color in a world that has faded to sepia tones. Finally, Clay speaks, his voice quieter than I expected, more uncertain. I wrote that letter 3 times before I sent it. Threw away the first 2 drafts because they sounded like excuses, like I was trying to make myself feel better about what happened to you here. I set down my teacup and look at him directly. He meets my eyes, and I see something there I did not expect. Not shame, exactly, but a kind of weariness that comes from carrying too much responsibility for too long. The congregation voted to disband last year. We were down to 12 members, most of them over 70. The building was falling apart faster than we could afford to repair it. The denomination offered to relocate us to a larger church in the county seat, but the remaining members decided they would rather let it die than watch it become something else. He pauses, turns his teacup in his hands, looks out the window at the cardinal still feeding at the tree. I stayed because someone needed to be here, to watch over things, to make sure the building was secure, the cemetery maintained, the records preserved. But I'm not getting any younger, and the diocese is pressuring me to take another assignment. They want to sell the property to developers who will tear down the church and build houses. I understand the practical considerations. I understand that buildings, like people, have lifespans, and that sometimes the most merciful thing is to let them go. But I also understand that some places hold too much history, too much memory, too much pain and beauty and human struggle to be erased without consequence. Clay reaches across the table and places his hand over mine. His fingers are warm from the teacup, slightly rough from years of manual labor. Ministers in small towns learn to do their own repairs, their own maintenance. They learn that keeping a building standing is as much a part of their calling as keeping a congregation faithful. I do not deserve your help. The church does not deserve your help. But the building, Desmond, the building deserves better than this. He pauses, withdraws his hand, looks directly into my eyes. Your mother built that sanctuary with her own hands. She raised the money, hired the craftsmen, supervised every detail. She wanted it to be beautiful, to be a place where people could feel the presence of something larger than themselves. She wanted it to be a place where everyone could find sanctuary. The word sanctuary hits me like a physical blow. I set down my teacup harder than I intended, and the sound echoes in the small kitchen like a gunshot. Clay does not flinch. He simply continues speaking, his voice steady and calm. She regretted what happened to you. She regretted her silence. She regretted not fighting harder for you when you needed her most. She told me so, many times in the years before she died. She said she failed you as a mother, and she was afraid she had failed God as well. I stand up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The kitchen suddenly feels too small, too warm, too full of ghosts and regrets and conversations that happened 20 years too late. Clay does not try to stop me as I walk to the window and look out at the church. From here, I can see the damage more clearly. The foundation is not just cracked, but actively sinking on one side. The roof is missing shingles, and water stains on the siding suggest extensive interior damage. The steeple leans at an angle that suggests structural failure is imminent. It would be easier to tear it down and start over. Easier and probably cheaper. But Clay is right about one thing. My mother did build that sanctuary with her own hands, her own vision, her own desperate hope that beauty could triumph over ugliness, that love could overcome fear. I turn back to face him. He is still sitting at the table, his hands folded around his teacup, his eyes fixed on me with an expression I cannot quite read. What exactly are you asking me to do? He does not answer immediately. When he does speak, his voice is barely above a whisper. Save it, if you can, if you want to, if you think it is worth saving. He pauses, looks down at his hands, then back up at me. Do what you will. I just thought maybe it would matter. To you. I walk out of the parsonage without another word. I walk across the overgrown lawn to the cemetery behind the church, where the headstones lean at crazy angles and the grass grows wild between graves. I walk until I find the stone I'm looking for, the one I have never seen, but somehow recognize immediately. Margaret Clark, beloved wife and mother. She walks with God now. I kneel beside the grave and place my hand on the worn granite. The stone is cold beneath my palm, but something inside my chest is warming, expanding, threatening to crack the careful walls I have built around my heart. I stay there until the sun is directly overhead, until the shadows are short and sharp, until the cardinal has finished its meal and flown away. I stay there until I know what I'm going to do, even though I'm not sure I understand why. When I finally stand, my knees are stiff from kneeling on the cold ground. I walk back to the parsonage, where Clay is still sitting at the kitchen table, still holding his teacup, still waiting. I will need to bring my own crew. I will need access to the building 24 hours a day. I will need you to stay out of my way while I work. Clay nods slowly, his face carefully neutral. And I will need you to understand that I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for the church. I am not doing this for forgiveness or reconciliation or any of the other things you might be hoping for. I pause, look out the window one more time at the building that holds so much of my history, so much of my pain. I'm doing this for her, for the woman who raised me, for the building she loved, for the sanctuary she tried to create. Clay sits down his teacup and extends his hand across the table. I look at it for a long moment before reaching out to shake it. When can you start? I'm already reaching for my phone to call Marcus, to rearrange my schedule, to begin the process of bringing a dead building back to life. Tomorrow, I return to Baltimore that evening and spend the night making lists. Materials needed, equipment required, timeline estimates, the practical details of bringing a dying building back to life. I work until 3 a.m, surrounded by architectural drawings spread across my dining room table. My laptop open to supplier websites, my phone buzzing with texts from Marcus as I rearrange our entire schedule. This is what I do when I cannot sleep, when my mind refuses to quiet. I organize. I plan. I reduce the chaos of emotion to the orderly progression of tasks that can be completed, problems that can be solved, measurements that can be calculated with precision. But even as I work, I can feel something stirring beneath the surface of my carefully controlled world. Something that has been dormant for 20 years, waiting for permission to breathe again. The next morning, I drive back to Marigold with my truck loaded with initial supplies and my mind focused on the work ahead. I have hired a crew from Frederick, skilled craftsmen who specialize in historic restoration and will not ask questions about my connection to this place. They will arrive tomorrow, and we will begin the slow, careful process of assessment and repair. I unlock the church doors for the second time in 2 days and step inside with my notebook and flashlight. The morning sun streams through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air like tiny spirits. I begin in the basement, checking the foundation, the electrical system, the plumbing that was added decades after the original construction. The damage is worse than I expected, but not beyond repair. The foundation needs extensive work on the east side, where years of poor drainage have caused the ground to shift. The electrical system is a maze of amateur additions and dangerous shortcuts that will need to be completely replaced. The plumbing is functional but outdated, and the heating system appears to have been installed sometime during the Eisenhower administration. But the bones of the building are sound. The original timber frame is solid, built from old-growth oak that has hardened with age. The roof structure is intact despite the missing shingles. The floor joists are level and strong. This is a building that was constructed to last, built by people who understood that sacred spaces require permanence, that some things are meant to outlive the people who create them. I work methodically, documenting every flaw, every weakness, every sign of neglect. I measure and photograph and sketch, creating a detailed record of what needs to be done. This is familiar work, comfortable work, the kind of technical problem solving that has sustained me for 20 years. But as I move through the sanctuary, something else begins to happen. Memories surface unbidden, triggered by the play of light through the windows, the creak of floorboards beneath my feet, the echo of my own footsteps in the empty space. I am 7 years old, sitting in the third pew from the front, swinging my legs because my feet do not quite touch the floor. My mother is beside me, smelling of lavender and lemon oil, her hand resting gently on my shoulder when I fidget during the sermon. She whispers the words to hymns I do not yet know, her voice soft and melodic, teaching me the rhythms of worship. I am 12, standing at the piano during choir practice, learning to harmonize with the other children. Elijah is beside me, his voice beginning to crack with adolescence, his shoulder brushing mine as we lean over the shared hymnal. He smells like soap and summer grass, and when he smiles at me, something in my chest flutters like a trapped bird. I am 16, helping my mother arrange flowers for Easter service. She has taught me which colors work together, how to create balance and beauty from simple elements. We work in comfortable silence, her movements graceful and sure, mine awkward but eager. She tells me that beauty is a form of prayer, that creating something lovely is a way of honoring the divine. I am 20, standing in the choir loft beside Elijah, our voices blending in perfect harmony on the closing hymn. His hand brushes mine as we turn the page, and the touch sends electricity through my entire body. I look at him, and he looks back, and in that moment, I know that he feels it too. The connection, the longing, the love that has been growing between us like a secret garden, hidden but somehow inevitable. I am 21, standing at the altar, speaking my truth to a congregation that has known me since birth. I am terrified but determined, certain that honesty is the foundation of faith, that love cannot be wrong if it feels this right. I look for my mother in the congregation, seeking her eyes, needing her support. But she is looking down at her hands, her face pale and stricken, and I realize with a shock that cuts through me like broken glass that she already knows what is coming. The memories hit me like physical blows, each one sharp and clear and painful. I lean against the altar rail, my notebook forgotten, my careful professional composure cracking like old paint. This is why I stayed away. This is why I built my life in Baltimore, surrounded by other people's sacred spaces, other people's histories. This is why I never returned, not even for my mother's funeral, because I knew that coming back would mean facing not just the pain of what happened, but the beauty of what I lost. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the present moment, on the work that needs to be done. I have a job to complete, a contract to fulfill, a building to save. Everything else is just memory, just the ghosts of a life that no longer exists. But as I continue my assessment, moving through the sanctuary with my measuring tape and camera, I can feel the ghosts following me. They whisper in the creak of floorboards, in the sigh of wind through broken windows, in the quality of light that filters through stained glass that my mother designed with her own hands. The crew arrives the next morning, and we begin the work in earnest. I have chosen them carefully, men and women who understand that restoration is as much about preservation as it is about repair. We start with the foundation, the invisible work that will determine whether everything else can stand. We dig carefully around the perimeter of the building, exposing the old stone foundation that has been hidden underground for over a century. The stones are hand-cut limestone, fitted together with a mortar that has hardened to near-concrete strength. This is craftsmanship from an era when buildings were meant to last forever, when the idea of planned obsolescence would have been considered sinful. As we work, I find myself falling into the rhythm of physical labor, the satisfaction of problems solved through sweat and skill. My hands remember the weight of tools, the grain of wood, the texture of stone. This is honest work, the kind that leave you tired and dirty and strangely peaceful at the end of the day. But the peace is fragile, easily shattered by unexpected moments of recognition. The way the afternoon light falls across the sanctuary floor, exactly as it did 30 years ago. The sound of wind in the oak trees outside, the same trees where I carved my initials as a child. The echo of hammers on wood, which sounds too much like applause, too much like the sound of a congregation clapping after a particularly moving hymn. And then, on the third day, as I am working alone in the sanctuary, replacing rotted floorboards near the altar, I hear it. Music, faint and distant, but unmistakably real. I stop working and listen. The melody is familiar, a hymn I have not heard in 20 years but could sing from memory. The piano is slightly out of tune, some of the keys sticking, but the musician is skilled, compensating for the instrument's limitations with careful touch and timing. I follow the sound to its source, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The music is coming from the choir loft, where an old, upright piano sits covered in dust and neglect. Someone is playing it, someone who knows the hymns of my childhood, someone who understands the particular acoustics of this space. I climb the narrow stairs to the loft, my heart beating faster with each step. The music grows clearer as I approach, more distinct. It is How Great Thou Art, the closing hymn from countless Sunday services, the song that always made my mother cry, though she never explained why. I reach the top of the stairs and stop. Sitting at the piano, his back to me, is a man I have not seen in 20 years but would recognize anywhere. His hair is gray now, cut shorter than he used to wear it, and his shoulders are broader, more settled. But his hands on the keys are the same, graceful and sure, coaxing beauty from an instrument that should be beyond repair. Elijah. He finishes the hymn and sits quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the keys. Then he speaks without turning around. I heard you were back. His voice is deeper than I remember, roughened by years and experience, but still unmistakably his. I stand frozen on the stairs, unable to move forward or retreat, caught between the past and the present like a man suspended over a chasm. He turns on the piano bench and looks at me directly. His face is older, marked by lines around his eyes and mouth, but his eyes are the same warm brown I remember, the same eyes that used to find mine across the sanctuary during worship, the same eyes that looked at me with love and fear and desperate longing on the night before everything changed. I was in Boston, teaching composition and piano. I came back last month when I heard about the church. He pauses, runs his fingers over the keys without pressing them, a gesture so familiar it makes my chest ache. I wanted to see it before it was gone, before they tore it down and built something new in its place. I finally find my voice, though it comes out rougher than I intended. How did you know I was here? He smiles, And for a moment, he looks exactly like the boy I fell in love with, the one who used to sneak out of his house to meet me by the creek behind the cemetery, the one who taught me that love could be both sacred and secret, both beautiful and dangerous. This is Marigold, Desmond. Everyone knows everything within an hour of it happening. Mrs. Henderson saw your truck at the church yesterday. She called her sister, who called the pastor's wife, who mentioned it to Clay during his morning coffee. He stands up from the piano bench, moves closer to where I stand on the stairs. He is taller than I remembered, or perhaps I'm seeing him with adult eyes instead of the perspective of youth. I heard you were doing well. Successful business. Beautiful house in the city. I am glad. There is no bitterness in his voice, no accusation. Just a quiet sadness that matches my own. The melancholy of two people who loved each other once and lost each other to forces beyond their control. We look at each other across the space between the stairs and the piano, across 20 years of separation and silence, and the careful lives we have built from the ruins of what we used to be. What are you doing here, Elijah? He gestures toward the piano, toward the sanctuary spread out below us, toward the building that holds so much of both our histories. The same thing you are, I think, trying to understand what it means to come home. He walks to the railing that overlooks the sanctuary, and I follow him. Together, we look down at the space where we first learned to love each other, where we first learned that love could be both blessing and curse, where we first discovered that the world is not always ready for the truth of who we are. The afternoon light streams through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Dust motes dance in the golden beams, and for a moment, I can almost see the ghosts of our younger selves, sitting in the pews, singing in the choir, believing that love was simple and that truth was always welcome. Do you remember, Elijah says quietly, how we used to think this place was magic, how we thought that if we prayed hard enough, believed strongly enough, everything would work out the way it was supposed to. I remember believing that God lived in the spaces between the hymns, that the building itself was holy, that love was always a form of prayer. I remember thinking that if I was good enough, faithful enough, honest enough, everything would be all right. I remember being wrong. We stand in silence for a long time, looking down at the sanctuary, remembering what we were and what we lost and what we have become in the years since. The crew continues working below us, their voices and tools creating a symphony of restoration, of things being made whole again. But some things, I think, cannot be restored. Some things, once broken, remain broken forever, no matter how carefully we try to piece them back together. And yet, as I stand here beside Elijah, listening to the sound of hammers and saws and the distant conversation of workers, I feel something stirring in my chest. Not hope, exactly, but something close to it. A recognition that perhaps coming home is not about returning to what was, but about finding the courage to imagine what might be. The sun is setting by the time we finally leave the choir loft. Elijah walks me to the door, and we stand together on the front steps, looking out at the town that shaped us, that broke us, that somehow still calls to us across the years. I will be back tomorrow, I tell him. There is still work to do. He nods, puts his hands in his pockets, looks up at the steeple that still leans toward heaven despite everything. So will I, if that is all right with you. I want to say yes. I want to say that it is more than all right, that his presence here feels like a gift I do not deserve, that the sound of his voice in this space makes something in my chest unclench for the first time in 20 years. Instead, I simply nod and walk to my truck, leaving him standing on the church steps as the shadows lengthen and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. That night, I dream of the sanctuary filled with music and light and the sound of voices raised in harmony. I dream of a place where love is not a sin but a sacrament, where truth is not a weapon but a bridge, where two young men can stand together and sing without fear or shame. I wake before dawn, dress quickly, and drive back to Marigold, eager to continue the work of restoration, of bringing something beautiful back to life. And perhaps, though I do not yet allow myself to think it, of finding my way home. For 3 weeks, Elijah and I work in the same space without speaking of anything that matters. We exchange polite conversations about the weather, the progress of the restoration, the quality of the morning light through the windows. He arrives each day around 10, sits at the piano, and plays the hymns of our childhood while I direct the crew in their careful work of resurrection. The building is beginning to breathe again. We have repaired the foundation, replaced the worst of the rotted floorboards, and started the delicate process of restoring the stained glass windows. Each day brings visible progress, measurable improvement, the satisfaction of problems solved and beauty reclaimed. But beneath the surface of our professional politeness, I can feel something building, a tension that has nothing to do with structural engineering and everything to do with the weight of 20 years of silence, 20 years of questions that were never asked, conversations that were never finished. Elijah plays differently now than he did when we were young. His technique is more refined, more controlled, but there is a depth to his playing that was not there before. He has learned to find the sorrow in hymns that once sounded only joyful, to discover the hope hidden in songs that once seemed only mournful. He has learned what I have learned, that beauty and pain are not opposites, but partners in the dance of being human. On a Tuesday morning in early October, we are working on the pulpit. The crew is replacing the carved panels that have been damaged by years of water infiltration, and I'm on my hands and knees, measuring the space where the new wood will fit. The work requires precision, patience, the kind of careful attention that has always calmed my restless mind. My measuring tape catches on something beneath the floorboards. I assume it is a nail or a piece of debris, but when I reach underneath to clear it, my fingers find paper. Old paper, folded and wedged between the joists like a secret waiting to be discovered. I work it free carefully, aware that whatever I have found is fragile, probably decades old. The paper is yellowed and brittle, the folds worn soft with age. I unfold it slowly, afraid it might crumble in my hands. It is a letter. The handwriting is familiar, though the ink has faded to a pale brown. At the top of the page, in my mother's careful script, I read the words that make my heart stop beating for a moment. My dearest Desmond, I sit back on my heels, staring at the letter in my hands. Around me, the sounds of restoration continue. Hammers and saws, and the quiet conversations of workers going about their business. But I am suddenly alone in the world, surrounded by silence, and the ghost of my mother's voice speaking to me from beyond the grave. I fold the letter carefully and slip it into my jacket pocket. This is not something to be read in public, not something to be shared with the crew or discussed over the sound of construction. This is private, personal, a message that has waited 20 years to find its way to me. I stand up and walk outside, into the crisp October air. The leaves are beginning to turn, splashes of gold and crimson against the gray sky. I walk to the cemetery behind the church, to the place where my mother's body rests beneath the cold ground, where I knelt 3 weeks ago and made the decision to return to this place. I sit on the stone bench beside her grave, the same bench where she used to sit during church picnics, watching the children play among the headstones. I take out the letter and unfold it again, my hands trembling slightly. My dearest Desmond, it begins. If you're reading this, then you have come home. I pray that you have, though I understand if you cannot. I pray that you have found it in your heart to forgive me, though I understand if you cannot do that either. I stop reading and look up at the sky. A crow is circling overhead, its black wings cutting through the pale air. For a moment, I am 7 years old again, sitting beside my mother on the same bench, listening to her explain why some flowers bloom in spring and others wait for fall, why some things need winter before they can be beautiful. I force myself to continue reading. I know you think I abandoned you. I know you think I chose your father over you, chose the church over my son, chose silence over love. You're not wrong to think these things. I did choose silence when I should have chosen courage. I did fail you when you needed me most. But I need you to know that my silence was not because I was ashamed of you. It was because I was ashamed of myself. I was ashamed of my cowardice, my inability to stand up to your father, my failure to protect you from the cruelty of people who should have known better. I knew who you were long before you found the words to tell me. I knew because I watched you with Elijah, saw the way you looked at him, the way you both lit up when you were together. I knew because a mother knows her child, knows his heart, knows the shape of his love, even when he is still discovering it himself. I should have told you this. I should have said the words you needed to hear. I should have stood up in that sanctuary and told the congregation that my son was perfect exactly as God made him, that love in any form is sacred, that anyone who could not see the beauty in your truth was blind to the real meaning of faith. But I was afraid. I was afraid of your father, afraid of the church, afraid of losing the only community I had ever known. I was afraid of being cast out, of being alone, of having to start over in a world that seemed too big and too cold for a woman like me. I was a coward, Desmond, and my cowardice cost me the most precious thing in my life. It cost me you. I have to stop reading again. Tears are blurring my vision, and my chest feels tight, as if someone has wrapped bands around my ribs and is slowly tightening them. I have not cried in years, have not allowed myself the luxury of grief or the indulgence of self-pity. But sitting here beside my mother's grave, reading words I never thought I would hear, I feel something breaking open inside me. The letter continues. Several more paragraphs of apology and explanation, of regret and hope, and the desperate love of a mother who recognized her failures too late to make amends. But it is the final paragraph that destroys me completely. I am hiding this letter in the church, in the place where you were hurt, because I hope that someday you will come back. Not for me, not for your father, not for the people who failed you, but for yourself. For the boy who used to help me arrange flowers, who used to sit beside me on the bench in the cemetery, who used to believe that this place was holy. Sacred is not what they told you it was, my darling boy. Sacred is not about rules or judgment or the fear of being different. Sacred is about love. Sacred is about truth. Sacred is about the courage to be exactly who you are, even when the world tells you that who you are is wrong. You are sacred, Desmond. You always were. You always will be. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say so. I love you. I have always loved you. I will love you until the stars burn out and the world ends and time itself forgets how to count the years. Your mother. I fold the letter carefully and hold it against my chest. Around me, the cemetery is quiet except for the sound of wind in the trees and the distant call of crows. The October sun is warm on my face, and for the first time in 20 years, I let myself cry. I cry for the boy I was, who needed to hear these words but never did. I cry for the mother I lost, who carried this guilt and regret until her dying day. I cry for the years we lost, the conversations we never had, the reconciliation that came too late. But I also cry from relief, from the knowledge that I was not unloved, not abandoned, not forgotten, from the understanding that my mother's silence was not indifference, but fear, not rejection, but her own form of brokenness. I sit there until the sun begins to set, until the air grows cool and the shadows lengthen across the grass. I sit there until I have read the letter 3 more times, until I have memorized every word, until I have absorbed the truth of it into my bones. When I finally stand up, my legs are stiff and my eyes are red, but something in my chest has loosened. The tight knot of anger and hurt that I have carried for 20 years has not disappeared, but it has shifted, softened, become something I can live with instead of something that lives in me. I walk back to the church, where the crew is packing up their tools for the day. The work continues, steady and sure, the building growing stronger with each passing day. But now I understand something I did not before. I am not just restoring this building. I am restoring my mother's dream, her vision of what sacred space could be. Elijah is still at the piano when I enter the sanctuary. He is playing something I do not recognize, something gentle and minor and full of longing. When he sees me, he stops playing and looks at me with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." I almost laugh at the accuracy of his observation. Instead, I walk to the piano and sit down on the bench beside him. He moves over to make room, and for a moment, we are sitting as we used to sit when we were young, close enough to share the music, close enough to feel each other's warmth. "I found something today. A letter. From my mother." I tell him about the letter, about what it said, about the 20 years of regret and love and hope that it contained. I do not read it to him, do not share the specific words, but I tell him about the gift of understanding it has given me, the way it has changed my understanding of the past. He listens without interrupting, his hands resting on the keys, his eyes focused on something beyond the sanctuary walls. When I finish speaking, he is quiet for a long moment. Then he begins to play again, the same gentle melody he was playing when I walked in. This time I recognize it. It is a lullaby my mother used to sing to me when I was very small, when I would wake up from nightmares, and she would sit beside my bed until I fell asleep again. "How do you know that song?" He smiles, and there is something sad and beautiful in his expression. She used to hum it sometimes when she was working in the garden, when she thought no one was listening. I always wondered what it was. We sit together in the growing darkness, listening to the familiar melody fill the empty sanctuary. Outside, the first stars are appearing in the clear sky, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell is chiming the hour. I think about my mother's words, about the definition of sacred that she left for me in her letter. Not about rules or judgment or fear, but about love and truth and the courage to be exactly who we are. I look at Elijah, at the man he has become, at the boy he used to be. I think about the love we shared, the love we lost, the love that still exists somewhere in the space between us, changed but not diminished by the years that have passed. I think about the building around us, about the work of restoration that continues day by day, about the possibility of bringing something beautiful back to life. And I think about the question that has been haunting me since I first returned to this place, the question I have been afraid to ask myself, afraid to answer. What would it mean to come home? Not just to this building, not just to this town, but to myself, to the truth of who I am, to the love that I've spent 20 years trying to forget. I do not have an answer yet, but sitting here beside Elijah, listening to my mother's lullaby echo in the sanctuary she built with her own hands, I think I am finally ready to find out. The letter is still in my jacket pocket, my mother's words still fresh in my mind. Sacred is not what they told you it was. Sacred is about love. Sacred is about truth. Sacred is about the courage to be exactly who you are. Tomorrow, I will continue the work of restoration. I will replace more floorboards, repair more windows, bring more beauty back to this broken place. But tonight, I will sit here in the darkness with Elijah, listening to the music of memory, and I will let myself believe that some things can be made whole again, that some loves can survive even the longest winter, that some sanctuaries can be reclaimed by the very people who were once cast out from them. The music continues, gentle and sure, filling the empty space with something that feels like hope. The restoration takes 6 weeks to complete. 6 weeks of careful work, of replacing what was broken and preserving what could be saved. The foundation is solid now, the floors level, the windows gleaming with new glass that captures the light just as my mother intended. The steeple stands straight again, its cross pointing toward heaven without apology or doubt. On the final day, I stand alone in the sanctuary, surveying what we have accomplished. The pews gleam with fresh polish, their wood grain brought back to life by careful attention and respect. The altar is restored to its original dignity. The pulpit where my father once preached judgment, now ready to hold words of whatever truth the future might bring. The piano, tuned and repaired, waits silently for hands that know how to coax beauty from its keys. But it is the windows that take my breath away. My mother's stained glass, cleaned and restored, blazes with color in the afternoon sun. Saints and angels gaze down with serene faces, their robes flowing in patterns of blue and gold and crimson. The largest window, behind the altar, depicts the scene of Jesus welcoming the children, his arms outstretched in an embrace that includes everyone who approaches with open hearts. I remember my mother explaining this window to me when I was small, how she had insisted on this particular scene because she wanted the church to be a place where everyone could feel welcome, where no one would be turned away. At the time, I thought she was speaking in generalities, the kind of universal love that Sunday school teachers talk about. Now I understand that she was speaking directly to me, preparing me for a truth she already knew I would need to hear. The work is finished, but I am not ready to leave. I have spent the last 6 weeks in a strange state of suspension, focused on the practical tasks of restoration while avoiding the deeper questions that brought me here. But now, with the building complete and beautiful around me, I can no longer hide from the choices I need to make. Clay appears in the doorway, moving quietly as if he does not want to disturb the peace of the moment. He walks down the center aisle slowly, his eyes taking in the transformation we have wrought. When he reaches the front of the sanctuary, he stops and looks up at the windows, and I see tears on his cheeks. "She would be proud," he says quietly. "Your mother. She would be so proud of what you have done here." I nod, not trusting my voice. The letter is still in my jacket pocket, where I have carried it every day since I found it. Her words have become part of me now, a new understanding of love and sacrifice and the many forms that courage can take. Clay turns to face me, his expression serious but not unkind. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that there is no wrong answer. The building is restored. Your work here is complete. But I wonder if you might consider staying for the rededication. Not as the contractor, but as yourself, as Margaret's son, as someone who belongs here." The word belongs hits me like a physical blow. I've spent 20 years believing that I do not belong anywhere, that I am forever an outsider looking in. That home is a luxury I forfeited when I chose truth over acceptance. Clay continues, his voice gentle but insistent. "I've been thinking about what kind of service this should be. Not a religious service, exactly, but something more universal. A celebration of the building, of the community that built it, of the love that has sustained it through all these years of neglect and abandonment." He pauses, looks around the sanctuary, then back at me. "I would like you to speak, to share your mother's vision for this place, to help us understand what it means to create something beautiful, something lasting, something that can welcome everyone who seeks sanctuary." I want to say no. I want to finish the paperwork, collect my final payment, and drive back to Baltimore where my controlled, predictable life is waiting for me. I want to return to the safety of other people's sacred spaces, where I can work without being seen, where I can restore beauty without risking my own heart. But I think about my mother's letter, about her definition of sacred, about the courage to be exactly who I am. And I think about the building around me, about the work we have done together, about the possibility that some broken things can indeed be made whole again. When is the rededication? This Sunday. 3 days from now. I have sent invitations to everyone who used to attend, to their families, to anyone who has ever been part of this community. I do not know how many will come, but I hope some will. I hope enough will. I look up at the windows, at the saints and angels my mother chose to watch over this space. I look at the altar where I was baptized, where I was confirmed, where I spoke my truth and was rejected for it. I look at the piano where Elijah sits every day, playing the hymns of our childhood, keeping the music alive even when there is no congregation to hear it. I will stay, I tell Clay. I will speak. He nods, his relief evident. Then he reaches into his jacket and pulls out a folded piece of paper. There's one more thing. I have been working on the service, trying to find the right words, the right tone. But I realize that the most important words are not mine to write. They belong to this community, to the people who have been shaped by this place, who have found meaning here despite everything that has happened. He unfolds the paper and shows it to me. It is a simple program, elegant in its simplicity. At the top, in graceful script, it reads, "A celebration of sanctuary." Below that, a brief description of the building's history, the restoration process, the hope for its future. And at the bottom, in smaller type, a single line that makes my breath catch. All are welcome. All belong. All are loved. I stare at the words, remembering my mother's letter, remembering the boy I was who needed to hear these words but never did. Remembering the man I have become, who still needs to hear them, who still struggles to believe them. Clay folds the program and slips it back into his jacket. I should warn you, not everyone will be happy that you are here. Not everyone has changed their minds about what happened 20 years ago. Some people will come out of curiosity, some out of nostalgia, some out of genuine desire for reconciliation. But others will come with the same judgments they carried then, the same inability to see love as anything but conditional. I understand. I have never expected universal acceptance, never believed that time alone could heal all wounds. But I have learned that the opinions of others, while painful, cannot define my worth or determine my place in the world. I will speak honestly, I tell Clay. I will tell them about the building, about the work we have done, about what it means to restore something beautiful from something broken. I will tell them about sanctuary, about the true meaning of sacred space, about the kind of community my mother envisioned when she designed these windows. And if they cannot accept that, if they cannot accept me, then at least I will have spoken my truth. At least I will have honored her memory and my own integrity. Clay nods, extends his hand for me to shake. But instead of shaking it, he pulls me into an embrace, the kind of hug that speaks of forgiveness and acceptance, and the hope that broken relationships can sometimes be mended. When he releases me, he steps back and looks around the sanctuary one more time. She really would be proud, he says again, not just of the building, but of the man you have become. After he leaves, I sit in the front pew and try to imagine what Sunday will bring. I picture the sanctuary filled with people, some I remember from my childhood, some who are strangers now, some who will welcome me, and some who will not. I picture myself standing at the podium, speaking words I have not yet written, trying to bridge the gap between past and present, between hurt and healing. The afternoon light slants through the windows, casting rainbows across the polished floor. Somewhere in the distance, I hear the sound of a piano, and I know that Elijah is here, as he has been every day for the past 6 weeks, keeping the music alive in this place that once fell silent. I walk to the choir loft and find him at the piano, his fingers moving across the keys with the practiced ease of someone who has spent a lifetime making music. He does not look up when I enter, but I know he is aware of my presence. Clay asked me to speak at the rededication, I tell him. He finishes the phrase he is playing before responding. Will you? Yes. I think so. Yes. He turns on the bench to face me, and I see something in his expression that I have not seen in 20 years. Not the careful politeness we have maintained for the past 6 weeks. Not the distant friendship of two people who used to know each other well. Something deeper, more real, more dangerous. I am glad, he says simply. This place needs to hear your voice. It needs to understand what you have accomplished here, what you have given back to it. He pauses, looks down at the keys, then back at me. I am proud of you, Desmond, for coming back, for doing this work, for being brave enough to face this place and these people in your own history. The words hit me with unexpected force. I realize that I have been waiting 20 years to hear them, not from Clay, not from the congregation, but from Elijah, from the person who knew me best, who loved me most, who disappeared from my life without explanation or goodbye. Why did you leave that night? I ask, the question finally finding its way to the surface after all these years. Why did you not say goodbye? He is quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the keys without pressing them. When he speaks, his voice is soft, almost inaudible. Because I was a coward, because I was 19 years old and terrified, and I thought that if I stayed, if I stood with you, I would be destroyed too. because I thought that love was not worth the price they were asking us to pay. He looks up at me, and I see tears in his eyes. I have regretted it every day since. I have carried the shame of that choice, the knowledge that I abandoned you when you needed me most. I have spent 20 years trying to make amends for a moment of cowardice that I can never take back. I want to be angry. I want to hold on to the hurt and betrayal I have carried for 2 decades. But standing here in this restored sanctuary, surrounded by the evidence of what could be rebuilt, what can be forgiven, what can be made beautiful again, I find that anger is not what I feel. We were children, I tell him. We were scared children in an impossible situation. We both did what we thought we had to do to survive. He nods, but I can see that he has not forgiven himself, may never forgive himself completely. I came back to Boston because I heard you were here, because I wanted to see you, to apologize, to try to make things right, but mostly because I wanted to tell you that I never stopped loving you. That 20 years did not change that, could not change that. The words hang in the air between us like a bridge I am not sure I am ready to cross. Love, I have learned, is not always enough. Love does not automatically heal wounds or erase history or guarantee happy endings. But love, genuine love, is perhaps the only thing that makes healing possible. Sunday will be difficult, I tell him. There will be people who remember what happened, who have not changed their minds about who we are, what we mean to each other. He nods, understanding. But I want you to know that I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm not ashamed of who I am, of who I love, of the truth I spoke in this place 20 years ago. I'm not ashamed of you, of us, of what we meant to each other. I pause, look around the sanctuary, at the beautiful space we have helped restore to life. If you want to sit beside me on Sunday, if you want to be seen with me, if you want to claim your place in this community alongside mine, I would be honored. But I understand if you are not ready, if the cost still feels too high. Elijah stands up from the piano bench and walks to where I am standing. He reaches out and takes my hand, his fingers warm and familiar despite the years that have passed. I am ready, he says quietly. I am ready to be brave. We stand together in the choir loft, looking down at the sanctuary where we first learned to love each other, where we first discovered that love could be both blessing and curse, where we first learned that the world is not always ready for the truth of who we are. But we are ready now, ready to speak that truth again, to claim our place in this community, to offer our love as a gift rather than hide it as a shame. Sunday is coming. The sanctuary is prepared. The invitations have been sent. All that remains is to find the courage to open the doors and see who will walk through them, to speak the words that need to be spoken, to trust that love, finally, will be enough. Sunday arrives with the kind of crisp October morning that makes everything feel possible. I wake early in the small bed and breakfast where I've been staying, dress in my best suit, and drive to the church with my heart beating steadily, but not frantically. I have found, over the past few days, a kind of peace I did not expect. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of acceptance. Whatever happens today, I will have done what I came here to do. The sanctuary is already filled when I arrive. Not packed, but fuller than I dared hope. I recognize faces from my childhood, older now, marked by the years that have passed since I last saw them. Mrs. Henderson from the farm stand, her hair white now, but her eyes still sharp. The Morrison family, minus the patriarch who died several years ago. Young families I do not recognize, newcomers to the community who have heard about the restoration and come out of curiosity or genuine interest. And there are others. People I remember from that final Sunday 20 years ago. People who turned their faces away when I spoke my truth. People who voted for my departure from the only community I had ever known. They sit in the back pews, their expressions guarded, their presence a reminder that reconciliation is not always possible, that some wounds do not heal simply because time has passed. Clay stands at the podium, welcoming everyone, explaining the purpose of the gathering. He speaks about the building's history, about the restoration process, about the hope that this space can once again serve as a place of gathering and reflection for the community. His words are careful, inclusive, designed to offend no one while excluding no one. Then he calls my name, and I walk to the front of the sanctuary. I do not look at the congregation immediately. Instead, I look up at the windows at the saints and angels my mother chose to watch over this space, at the scene of Jesus welcoming the children that blazes with color in the morning light. When I finally turn to face the congregation, I see Elijah sitting in the third row, exactly where he used to sit when we were young. He is wearing a simple dark suit, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes focused on me with an expression of quiet support. Beside him, the pew is empty, a space left for me when I am finished speaking. I have prepared remarks, but standing here, I find that the words I plan to say are not the words I need to speak. Instead, I tell them about my mother, about her vision for this place, about the care she took in choosing every detail, about her belief that sacred space should be a place where everyone can find sanctuary. I tell them about the restoration, about the work we have done to preserve what she built, about the care we have taken to honor her memory and her intentions. I tell them about the craftsmen who have worked on this project, about their skill and dedication, about the way they have treated this building not as a job, but as a calling. And then I tell them about the letter, not the specific words, not the private grief and regret my mother carried, but the essence of what she wanted me to understand. That sacred is not about rules or judgment or the fear of being different. That sacred is about love, about truth, about the courage to be exactly who we are. I pause, look around the sanctuary, meet the eyes of people who have known me since I was a child, people who remember the boy I was and are seeing the man I have become. I was broken in this room 20 years ago. I was told that who I am, who I love, was incompatible with faith, incompatible with community, incompatible with the sacred. I left believing that I had no place here, that I would always be an outsider, that home was something I had forfeited when I chose truth over acceptance. But I have learned something in the years since. I have learned that home is not a place that accepts us conditionally. Home is a place we claim for ourselves, a place we create through our own courage and love and determination to belong. I gesture toward the windows, toward the beautiful space that surrounds us. This building is my mother's gift to this community, but is also her gift to me. A reminder that beautiful things can be built from broken pieces, that love can triumph over fear, that sanctuary is not something we are given, but something we create. I step away from the podium and walk to the pew where Elijah waits. I sit beside him, and he reaches over to take my hand. It is a simple gesture, but in this place, with these people watching, it feels like the most radical act of courage I have ever performed. Some people leave. Not many, but enough that I notice the movement, the sound of feet on floorboards, the whisper of coats being gathered. They leave quietly, without drama or confrontation, but they leave. And I find that I am not hurt by their departure. I understand that not everyone is ready for the truth of who I am, and that their inability to accept me is not a judgment of my worth, but a limitation of their own understanding. But others stay. Most stay. And when a woman in the middle of the sanctuary begins to sing, her voice clear and strong in the morning air, others join in. The hymn is one I remember from childhood, one my mother used to hum while she worked in the garden. It fills the space with something that feels like acceptance, like welcome, like the promise that love, finally, might be enough. After the service, people approach us. Not everyone, but enough. They shake our hands, welcome us back, tell us they're glad we came home. Some apologize for the past, for their silence, for their failure to stand with us when we needed them most. Others simply express gratitude for the restoration, for the beauty we have brought back to this place. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s, takes my hands in hers and looks directly into my eyes. Your mother would be proud, she says, not just of the building, but of the man you have become. She always said you were special, that you had a gift for seeing beauty where others saw only problems. She pauses, glances at Elijah, then back at me. She was right. The afternoon passes in a blur of conversations, introductions, shared memories. Clay announces that he has received approval to keep the church open, to hold community events, to offer the space to anyone who needs a place to gather. It will not be the congregation it once was, but it will be something new, something more inclusive, something that honors the vision my mother had for this place. As the sun begins to set, the last of the visitors depart. Clay locks the doors, shakes our hands, and drives back to his house. Elijah and I are left alone in the parking lot, standing beside our cars, looking up at the building that has brought us back together. The next few days pass quietly. I finish the final paperwork, settle the accounts, prepare to return to Baltimore. But I'm not in a hurry. For the first time in years, I allow myself to exist without a schedule, without deadlines, without the constant pressure to move forward into whatever comes next. Elijah and I walk through the town, through the woods behind the church, through the years we lost, and the possibilities that lie ahead. We talk about the past, about the choices we made, about the ways we have both changed and grown in the decades since we last knew each other. We talk about the future, about what it might look like, about whether there's a place for us in each other's lives after so many years of separation. We do not make promises or commitments. We simply allow ourselves to be present with each other, to rediscover who we are now, to see if the love we once shared can find new expression in the people we have become. On my final morning in Marigold, I return to the church alone. I unlock the doors with the key Clay has given me, step into the sanctuary, and sit in the back pew where I used to sit as a child. The morning light streams through the windows, casting familiar patterns on the floor. The piano sits silent in the choir loft, waiting for hands that know how to make it sing. I take out my mother's letter and read it one more time. Then I fold it carefully and place it in the hymnal rack, where we'll wait for the next person who needs to hear her words about love and courage and the true meaning of sacred. I stand, walk to the altar, and light a single candle. The flame flickers in the draft from the windows, then steadies, burning bright and clear in the morning air. I have done what I came here to do. I have restored the building, honored my mother's memory, spoken my truth to the community that once rejected me. I have faced the past and found that I am stronger than my wounds, that love is more powerful than fear, that home is not a place we are given, but a place we choose to claim. As I walk toward the door, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn to find Elijah entering the sanctuary, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the gentle smile I remember from our youth. "I thought you might want company," he says, offering me one of the cups. We sit together in the front pew, drinking coffee and watching the candle burn. Outside, the world is waking up, beginning another day in the endless cycle of time and change and possibility. I think about the life I have built in Baltimore, about the work that waits for me there, about the careful routine I have established. I think about the house I have made beautiful, the business I have grown successful, the reputation I have earned for bringing broken things back to life. And I think about the choice I am facing now, the choice to return to that safe, controlled world, or to stay here and explore what it might mean to build something new from the ruins of what I once was. I do not have to decide today. I do not have to choose between my old life and whatever this new possibility might become. I can simply be present in this moment, in this place, with this person who has been part of my story from the beginning. The candle burns steady and bright. The morning light grows stronger. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes the hour, marking the passage of time, the endless opportunity for new beginnings. I am home, not because I have returned to the place where I was born, but because I have finally found the courage to be exactly who I am. Not because I have been accepted by everyone, but because I have learned to accept myself. The sanctuary is quiet around us, peaceful and beautiful and full of light. We sit together in the silence, 2 men who have found their way back to each other, 2 hearts that have learned to beat in harmony again. Outside, the world continues its ancient dance of change and growth and possibility. But here, in this moment, in this place we have helped restore to life, everything is still. Everything is perfect. Everything is exactly as it should be. We are home. We are together. We are at peace. The story continues, but it continues quietly, like a prayer whispered in the morning light, like a promise made in the sanctuary of love.